Well, this is a church building here in Austin. That's all boarded up. And it's just beautiful like that. It'd be nice if they use it for something useful now. They probably will in the future. There's not even a cross on this building anywhere. And if you can tell, the front of it has been bricked up. Now some folks might say, hey, if there are no crosses and I don't see a marquee sign anywhere, how do you know this was a church? Very simple. They left something as a clue. An old sign here for their parking lot. No synagogue parking. So I don't see a for sale sign or for lease sign. Maybe, just maybe, somebody's bought it and will do something useful with it. There's some graffiti on it and some overgrowth and yellow grass everywhere. How unprofessional. Howdy folks, Joe Zamecki here, Texas State Director for American Atheists, coming back at you again with another fine background. Check it out. What better condition for a church is there than all boarded up? Those signs say no trespassing. They don't say come worship with us or the fool in his heart has said there's no God. No, they say no trespassing, and they mean it. Southside Church of Christ is what this was. On the topic of Bible classes, as your Texas State Director for American Atheists, I intend to do a lot of speaking out on this issue. It is already a law, but I want to clear up some misconceptions, and I want to go ahead and issue a Bible class challenge. First, I'll talk a little bit about why the Bible classes are wrong. Then I'll talk about the challenge. The Bible classes that are going to be held in Texas public high schools soon are unconstitutional government endorsement and enforcement of religion. And I'll talk about that more a little later. But for sure, and specifically, the main problem with these Bible classes is it's religion being promoted by our government again. That's the obvious part. Well, let's go into some other reasons. Why don't they have a class on the Quran? Isn't that now a part of American history? And hasn't it been since Muslims have been immigrating to America? There are now mosques all over America. It's part of our heritage and our history now. It's time to have classes on the Quran, right? In the same school. The Bible is very simply a bad book. Just strictly on a literary level, it's bad writing. It's not good story writing. It's not very original. It's extremely violent, bloodthirsty, brutal type of writing. It's also a lot of fluff. If you ever sat down and read the Bible, I'm sure you'll notice that you're also hearing all about who begat who, as if that matters. But that was back in a time when people thought it was very important who your father was because of genes more than actions. Okay. That was when we had the divine right of kings. Look that one up. Bible classes in public high schools also imply that there is some shortage of Christian churches in America for high school students to go and visit and learn about the Bible. Now what's wrong with that, of course? Everything. There are entirely too many Christian churches in America. That's a fact. The major religions of the world are loaded with money and could solve the big problems of society today if they wanted to. The Vatican, Church of Latter-day Saints, Southern Baptist Convention. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporations that are actually for profit. Now, I would like to go ahead and issue a challenge to all atheists and other non-Christians in general. You know, anybody who's in favor of state-church separation. I have a challenge for you. If you're a public high school student in Texas, especially, sign up for one of those Bible classes. That's right, become a student. Get in that class and raise some questions. See how long you last in that class as a valued member of that class. Because when we ask the tough questions that derive from simple logic and reasoning once we hear the claims in the first place, a lot of times Christian educators want to shut us out. And that's not free speech at all, is it? Ask the hard questions like, how about this? Why did God rest on the seventh day of creation? My NIV Bible, New International Version, comes with commentary on every page, at the bottom of the page, talking about some of the more bizarre, question-inspiring verses above in each page of the Bible. And so when I read where it said that God rested on the seventh day of creation, then I read down what the excuse or apologetic was at the bottom of that. And guess what it said? It said, God rested on the seventh day, not because he was weary, but because that was the designated day of rest. How about that for some backpedaling? How about that for some scam artistry? Well, also, raise this one. Where in the Bible does it say what the people who God flooded to death with Noah's Ark and the Great Flood, that they actually deserved to have that kind of death, to be murdered like that? And I say it's murder. The Great Flood was the biggest abortion in human history, if you believe in it, but I call it mass murder as well, because think about it. God did not have to kill those people. He killed them on purpose. They were innocent. If you read before the Great Flood in Genesis, it talks about, very briefly, talks about what those people were doing wrong. And when I read it, all I got was, they were doing wicked things, unquote, you know? And that's not enough to be killed over. We don't get the death penalty for something as vague as that. But God went ahead and murdered every single man, woman, and child on earth, except for a handful, and all of the life off of that ark as well, including all the marine life, and all the plants and animals, all of the trees, all the bunnies, the gophers, all the Bambis and Thumpers. Ask why God murdered so many people and animals that were innocent if he's a loving God. And again, that's in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. The biggest killing spree of that whole book takes place in the first book of the Bible, the Genesis. From there, it just gets worse. There's a lot more, but I challenge any public high school student in Texas to sign up for one of those Bible classes. Get in that class, become a student, make yourself known, and ask questions. Ask the hard questions that we activists ask. Your teacher in that class should be able to come up with some kind of answers. If your teacher in that class cannot answer you satisfactorily, and of course they won't be able to, not with these questions, then you need to say so. The second part of this Bible class challenge is, once you ask the questions, the really hard questions they can't answer with logic or reason, tell them that. Let them know. Again, with respect, be a respectful student, be a good academic student about it. There's no need to be a vandal or malcontent. It's important to be respectful with this. Be a good student about it. I think a good student asks about the subject matter at hand to try to understand it. And so what they're doing by this is a big mistake, setting themselves up to have to answer questions about an illogical claim.